Hey everyone. Welcome back to Strange Mind 6. I'm your host Ruby, and today we're going to be getting back into Strange Things Are Happening in Creepers, Volume 6, titled The Gravedigger, written by Edgar J. Hyde. Where we last left off was Chapter 3. And we're going to be reading it today. It's called Chapter 3, Accused. But before we begin, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It would mean a great deal to me if you did. And without further ado, my dear friends, grab a snack, grab a drink, or sit back and relax. And let's get to it. Chapter 3, Accused. The events of the previous night did not pass unnoticed the next day. Everyone in the house seemed to be on edge, as though they were expecting something to happen. The four culprits hadn't shown their faces around the house, obviously keeping a low profile as requested. Jamie was in the living room watching TV, and his dad was in the kitchen, standing over a sink full of dirty dishes. He seemed a million miles away as he stood gazing out the window with a strange look on his face. By the sounds of things, Paula was upstairs, practicing her dance routines. The loud banging and thumping of her dancing around her room could be heard in every room downstairs. Jamie stood up and walked to the window. Outside, it was a gray day with no real hint of sunshine. Breaking through the dark clouds that seemed to hang over the graveyard, every time Jamie looked out the window, he got the feeling that somewhere out among the moss-covered headstones and dark overhanging trees, someone was watching him. Great, thought Jamie. Even during the day, this place gives me the creeps. As he turned and walked away from the window, the sound of the doorbell echoed throughout the house. Even Paula heard it over the thumping of her music. That's weird, thought Jamie. To get to the front of the door, you have to walk past the window, and I was just standing there and never saw anyone come through the gate. "Could someone get the door, please?" yelled Andrew from the kitchen. "I'll get it," Paula shouted, as she came running down the stairs 2 at a time. Jamie and Paula liked to compete with each other at everything. No matter how silly the task was, one of them had to be the quickest or the smartest or the funniest, just to be better than the other one. However, this time, Paula was certainly going to win the race to answer the door, because Jamie remained still, not sure of what might be standing on the other side of the door. Paula jumped down the last few stairs and reached the door. "I got here first," she said, turning to make sure Jamie heard her. Jamie remained in the living room as Paula heaved open the large wooden front door. A tall, thin man was standing in the doorway. Paula's head was directly in line with the man's wrist, and slowly her eyes started to climb upwards. The man was wearing chunky black boots that were caked with mud. His black pants were patched at the knee and tucked inside his boots. From what she could see of his sweater, it was dirty and frayed at the bottom, but it was difficult to see because the man was wearing a long black coat that reached the top of his knees and smelled awful. As Paula looked up at the stranger's face, it was difficult to see it because he was wearing a black hat that cast a shadow over his face. The man bent down toward Paula, coming close to her face, and she saw that he had very pale skin, almost ghostly, and a thin pointy nose with big nostrils. Paula felt a shiver run down her spine. "Is your father here?" he asked Paula, so close to her face she could feel his warm breath on her cheeks, smell his bad breath in her nose, and see the yellow stains on his teeth. "Who's at the door?" yelled Andrew from the kitchen. "It's someone for you, Dad," Paula replied, taking a step back from the stranger. Jamie walked to the front door. At the same time, his father walked from the kitchen, drying his hands on a towel before handing it to Jamie to hold for him. "Allow me to introduce myself," said the man to Andrew. "My name is Ebenezer Krim." Paula looked at Jamie. It was one of the few occasions that Jamie could remember seeing fear in her face. "Nice to meet you. I'm Andrew Price," said Andrew politely. "I'm the gardener for the graveyard," Mr. Krim continued. "How did you reach the front door?" interrupted Jamie. "I walked straight up the path and past the window," Mr. Krim said. "You couldn't have," Jamie replied. "You didn't see me?" Mr. Krim replied. "I saw you." The thought that this strange-looking man had been watching Jamie without him knowing made Jamie's blood run cold. "Would you like to come in for a cup of coffee?" asked Andrew. Jamie looked at his dad in disbelief. What on earth was he doing inviting this man into their home? "I'd love a coffee," Mr. Krim replied. "Jamie, run into the kitchen and get some coffee for Mr. Krim," said his father. Ebenezer Krim stepped inside the hallway, stamping his feet on the rug and knocking off large clumps of dried mud, as Jamie's dad closed the door behind him with a loud thud, as Mr. Krim made his way into the sitting room. Jamie pulled his dad back by the arm. "Dad, I don't know what it is about this man, but something isn't right," he whispered. His father seemed annoyed with him. "Be careful," he said. "Mr. Krim might hear you." "Why did you invite him in?" Jamie asked. "Well, I don't know if you're seeing something I'm not, but the man seems perfectly nice to me," his father replied. "But he's lying. He never passed the window." Jamie started to get very frustrated with his father. To him it was so obvious that Mr. Krim was a very strange man. "Jamie, if he didn't pass you at the window, how else could he have walked up to the front door?" his father asked. "I don't know. That's what's so spooky about him." "I've heard enough," said his father sternly. "There's nothing wrong with Mr. Krim. You hardly even know the man." "But," said Jamie, trying to interrupt. "No buts," continued his father. "Go and pour Mr. Krim a cup of coffee like I asked. Then come and join the rest of us in the sitting room." Jamie didn't argue. He knew his dad couldn't be talked into agreeing with him. Instead, Jamie headed off to the kitchen to do what his father had asked. A few minutes later, Jamie emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray with coffee for his dad and Mr. Krim, and hot chocolate for him and Paula. As he walked into the living room, he could see his father was sitting on one chair and Paula on the other. "Great," he thought. "Now I'll have to sit by Mr. Krim on the couch." Jamie set the tray down on the table and chose the seat on the other end of the couch from Mr. Krim. As his dad handed Mr. Krim his coffee, Mr. Krim cleared his throat and began to speak. You know, some people around here say things about me that aren't really true. They like to spread rumors. Really? Asked Andrew. Yes, continued Mr. Krim. They only say these things because they don't really know me. It's mainly the kids. They call me spooky or weird. I can't imagine why, said Jamie, trying hard to sound sincere when he really didn't want to. His dad gave him a look and told him to be quiet. Ebenezer Krim seemed to not notice and continued. A lot of times, the kids say things to hide their own guilt. What do you mean? Asked Andrew. Well, sometimes they'll do something they shouldn't have, something bad, then tell lies about me so that I get blamed and they get out of trouble. That's terrible, replied Andrew. I know, which brings me to the reason I'm visiting you. Last night, we had a bit of trouble in the graveyard. Jamie and Paula both looked at each other, dreading what Mr. Krim was going to say next. Some headstones were knocked over, he continued. How many? Trying hard not to act as if he didn't know. There were 23 in total, replied Mr. Krim. Where exactly were your kids last night, Mr. Price? He asked suspiciously. My kids, said Andrew, a little confused by the question. Jamie and Paula were at the library with me all night. And what time did you get home? Mr. Krim continued, looking at Jamie and Paula with his piercing eyes. I really don't like what you're trying to say, Mr. Krim, said Andrew. Neither do I, continued Jamie. Paula remained silent. My kids were with me all night, Andrew went on, and at no time did they leave my sight, so it wasn't them that pushed the headstones over. Ebenezer Krim didn't say anything. There was a long silence that made Jamie, Andrew, and Paula very uncomfortable. Mr. Krim just sat staring at everyone, his eyes slowly moving from Andrew to Paula to Jamie. Eventually he turned his gaze back to Paula. It was you, wasn't it? He yelled. Paula looked frightened as she sat on the chair, not saying anything. I think you should leave, shouted Andrew to Mr. Krim. We've all had enough. Mr. Krim appeared not to hear him. His eyes and attention were fixed on Paula. You did it for fun, didn't you? He said to her. No, I didn't, replied Paula. And anyways, it was an accident. Jamie winced. Aha! Mr. Krim yelled triumphantly. So you did do it. Paula started to get very angry. Jamie shouted at Mr. Krim, Leave her alone. But again, Mr. Krim ignored him. I told you to leave. Why did you do it? Mr. Krim snarled at Paula. I told you I didn't, she yelled back. Well, who was it then? Your brother? Paula couldn't take it anymore. No, it wasn't Jamie either. It was the ghosts, she shouted. The room fell into silence. Ghosts, Mr. Krim said with a smirk on his face. Are you trying to tell me evil ghosts knocked the headstones over. They're not bad ghosts, they're good. And more importantly, they're our friends. Paula, be quiet. Jamie yelled at her. Mr. Krim looked around the room. The look on their faces made him believe that Paula was telling the truth. I told you to leave, Mr. Krim, Andrew said. Ebenezer Krim did not reply. He stood up, put his cup on the table, made his way for the front door. As he reached the front door, he turned to Jamie's father. Believe me when I say this, Mr. Price. This is not the last you will hear from me, he said before slamming the door closed behind him. Everyone in the living room sat in silence thinking about what just happened. Now Ebenezer Krim knew their secret. Andrew looked at both Jamie and Paula and said, We all need to talk. I think this is just the beginning of our trouble with Mr. Krim. And that is where we are going to end Chapter 3. Tune in next video for Chapter 4, Kitchen Table Conference. This has been Ruby, signing off, my dear friends.